You're standing in the driveway at 6 in the morning, coffee going cold in your hand. Tyler's truck pulls out ahead, off to a job that still pays him by the hour, same as it did 5 years ago. You don't tell him you didn't have to be up this early, you never do. There's a cost nobody has ever put a name on for people like you. The toll of building something enormous, while everyone around you still assumes you're counting the same small numbers they are. Call it the silence tax. Today you'll see exactly what that tax buys, and what it quietly takes. Stay for this one, because by the end, you'll understand why the richest year of his life was also the loneliest one, and why he almost let it stay that way for good. This is Marcus Whitfield's story, and it starts nowhere near a boardroom. His mother worked 2 jobs for most of his childhood, a diner shift that started before sunrise, and a cleaning contract that ended after most of the block was already asleep, and the arithmetic of that house was never spoken out loud, it was just felt, in the specific silence that settles over a kitchen table on the night before rent is due. He was 9 the first time he understood that a phone call could change the mood of an entire evening, and he was 9 the first time he decided, quietly, without telling a single person, that he was never going to be the reason for one of those calls. He started keeping change in an old coffee can on the top shelf of his closet, behind a stack of folded shirts, and he did not tell his mother, not because he thought she would take it, but because he did not want her to know he was already worried about the same thing she was. That can was not a savings account. It was a promise, made to nobody, that he would figure out a way to stop this particular kind of quiet from ever repeating itself. If that kind of quiet sounds familiar to you, stick around, because the version of it he built as an adult is going to look almost nothing like you would expect. By the time he was 17, the coffee can had turned into something closer to a habit than a hiding place, and the habit needed a better container. A neighbor 2 streets over was hauling a broken vending machine to the curb, the kind that used to sit in the break room of a warehouse before the company that owned it went under, and Marcus asked if he could have it instead of letting it get picked up with the trash. He spent 3 weekends taking it apart on a tarp in the garage, teaching himself the wiring from forum posts and grainy repair videos, and when it finally hummed back to life, he did not sell it. He put it in the break room of a tire shop 2 towns over, split the earnings with the owner, and told absolutely nobody what he had just built. Not because it was impressive yet, it wasn't, but because he had already learned that talking about a plan before it worked only invited other people's doubt into a place where it did not belong. The second machine came from a laundromat that was closing. The third came from a contact he made buying the second. Within 2 years, he had a route, 7 machines, all of them bought broken and fixed by hand, all of them quietly earning, and a bank balance that had nothing to do with the $10 an hour stockroom job his coworkers assumed was his only income. He kept driving the same car. He kept eating the same lunch. The machines were never the story he told anyone. They were just the arithmetic running quietly underneath the story everyone thought they already knew. If you're the kind of person who's already doing the math on what 7 machines like that actually earn, don't leave yet, because the number he was sitting on by year 4 is the part almost nobody believes. This is where the story usually gets simple in people's heads. More machines, more money. But that's not actually what happened next. What happened next was slower and less dramatic than any of it sounds. He took a full-time job at a logistics company, mostly for the health insurance, and let his coworkers assume the route was a weekend hobby, a little side money, nothing worth asking about. Every dollar the machines made went straight back into buying the next broken one, then into a small storage unit he leased under his own name but never mentioned to anyone, then into a used pickup he bought in cash from a farmer 3 counties over, because a title with no loan on it meant one less number anyone could ask him to explain. He started calling this his invisible ledger, a private set of numbers that existed nowhere in the version of his life that other people could see. And he kept it that way on purpose. Not out of shame, out of protection. He had watched what happened to a cousin who mentioned a decent bonus at a family dinner once, watched the requests start within the same week, watched the relationship quietly change shape around a number that was never even that large to begin with. Marcus decided early that if people didn't know what he had, they couldn't need anything from it, and if they couldn't need anything from it, the people who stayed around him would be staying for reasons that had nothing to do with money at all. By the time the storage unit route had grown into leasing space and 3 laundromats outright, he was still wearing the same 3 work shirts on rotation, still driving the same truck, still the guy at the logistics company nobody would have picked out of a lineup as the one quietly clearing more in a year than most of that building's management combined. Here's the part the machines and the leases never show you, the part that doesn't show up on any ledger, invisible or otherwise. His mother started asking, gently at first, why he never came around anymore, why his cousin's wedding got a card instead of a visit, why a man with a stable job and no obvious problems always sounded a little tired on the phone and never stayed on it very long. What do you say to that, when the real answer is a number you've never told a single living person? He didn't have a lie ready for any of it, so he just kept the calls short instead, told himself he'd explain everything once the numbers were big enough to make the explanation feel worth the risk. The trouble with that plan is that the numbers kept getting bigger, and the version of him that could sit at his mother's table and say all of it out loud kept getting smaller and more out of practice instead. Keep this one running if you're doing chores or driving right now, because what he was actually sitting on by this point in the story is coming up in the next couple minutes, and it's not the number you're already guessing. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from managing 2 entirely separate versions of your own life at the same time. One that fixes vending machines on a tarp in a garage and quietly signs commercial leases, and one that shows up to Sunday dinner and lets everyone believe the stockroom job is still the whole story. What do you call it when the version of you that people love is only half real? He told himself. The gap between those 2 versions was the price of protecting his family from the way money changes how people look at each other. What he didn't let himself think about, not for years, was that the gap was also protecting him from something, from ever having to find out whether the people who loved him would still recognize him on the other side of it. The phone rang on a Tuesday night, an unfamiliar hospital number, and for 3 full rings, he almost let it go to voicemail, the way he let most calls go to voicemail these days. It was his father's neighbor calling from the hospital waiting room because his father had listed Marcus as the contact years ago and never updated it, and because his father, it turned out, hadn't wanted to bother him. A minor cardiac scare, stable, nothing life-threatening, but enough that Marcus found himself driving 2 hours at 11 at night with his hands tight on the wheel, running numbers in his head that had nothing to do with vending machines or lease terms for the first time in longer than he could remember. He sat in a plastic chair outside a hospital room and listened to his father, half awake, apologize for the inconvenience of needing help at all, and something about the word inconvenience landed harder than anything a doctor had said all night. He thought about the invisible ledger sitting untouched in 3 different accounts, growing quietly for years while his own father lay in a hospital bed, rationing his worry the same way he'd once rationed groceries. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel like protection at all. It felt like a door he had built himself, and locked, and then somehow forgotten he was standing on the wrong side of it. If you've ever sat in a chair like that one, running numbers that used to feel so far away from the people you love, stay for the next few minutes, because this is where the whole shape of the story turns. His father started talking, in the careful voice of someone doing math out loud, about missed shifts and a deductible, and whether the old truck could hold out a little longer before it needed real work done on it. And Marcus realized he had spent almost 2 decades building an invisible ledger, specifically so that no one he loved would ever have to sound like this in front of him. And here his father was, sounding exactly like this, because Marcus had never once let him know there was any other option in the room. He had assumed, for years, that the silence was the safest thing he could offer the people around him, a way of protecting them and the relationship, both from what money does to a family. Standing in that hallway, he understood the harder version of it for the first time. The silence hadn't just been protecting the relationship, it had been quietly starving it. 1 short phone call and 1 skipped dinner at a time, and it had almost cost him the chance to be standing in this hallway at all. He didn't announce a number. He didn't need to. He sat back down, took his father's hand, and said the only sentence that mattered. I have this handled. I've had it handled for longer than you know. And starting tonight, you don't do that kind of math alone again. He didn't tell his father the number that night, and he still hasn't. Not exactly. Not in a way either of them could repeat back with any accuracy. What he did instead was quietly become the reason his father's medical bills stopped being a topic of worried conversation. The reason the old truck finally got replaced without anyone framing it as a gift. The reason his mother took a part-time schedule instead of 2 full jobs for the first time since Marcus was 9 years old. None of it came with an announcement. There was no dinner where he stood up and revealed the invisible ledger to the family like the third act of a movie. He simply started closing gaps quietly, the same way he'd built the whole thing quietly. Except now the silence was pointed at solving problems instead of hiding a solution. His mother still doesn't know the full shape of what her son built. She knows something changed, that the tired edge in his voice on the phone softened, that he started staying for dessert instead of leaving right after the plates were cleared. Call it the second inheritance, the one that never shows up on any estate document. The quiet decision to let the people who raised you actually benefit from what their sacrifice made possible, instead of protecting them from ever finding out it worked. There's one more account nobody's mentioned yet, opened about a year ago, and this is the one that actually changes how this story ends. His daughter is 7, and last month, at her own request after overhearing far too much of a phone call she wasn't supposed to hear, Marcus sat her down at the kitchen table with an actual notebook and showed her, in numbers she could understand, how much $1 saved today is worth by the time she's his age. He didn't hide the shape of it from her the way his own household had hidden its numbers from him. He didn't turn it into a lecture either. He just opened the first ledger she'll ever keep, right there at the table, the same table where he once decided, at 9 years old, that nobody was ever going to explain this to him, so he'd have to figure it out alone in a coffee can on a closet shelf. She doesn't know what her father is worth. She's 7. But she knows what compounding means. She knows what a boring business is, and she already knows, in a way Marcus didn't learn until he was almost 30, that the quiet ones are usually the ones actually winning. Tyler still leases a new truck every 3 years, and still doesn't know what any of this cost him. Marcus still drives the old one. He's not planning on explaining that either. Some silences, it turns out, were never the problem in the first place. It was only ever the wrong kind that needed breaking. So picture that driveway again. 6 in the morning, coffee going cold, except this time it's not you standing in it. It's Tyler, 3 years from now, watching a moving truck pull out of the house 2 doors down. The modest one, the one that belonged to a guy from the logistics company who always kept to himself. Tyler won't know what that man was actually worth when he lived there. He'll just remember him as quiet, a little private, easy to underestimate. He won't know about the coffee can, or the 7 machines, or the invisible ledger, or the hallway outside a hospital room where an entire philosophy about money finally cracked open and let someone in. He'll just remember a guy who never seemed to need anything from anyone, and Tyler will be half right about that and completely wrong about why. The silence tax is real. It's the price of building something nobody can see, and for a long time Marcus paid it without asking what it was actually buying. What it bought him, eventually, was the choice of exactly when to stop paying it and exactly who got to find out first. Not the internet, not a headline. His father, in a hallway, holding his hand. That's the only reveal this story was ever building toward, and it never once needed a number attached to it.